morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is V-TESOL2020-N.H.Oanh and I am a teacher of English at Banking University, Faculty of Foreign Languages. I have been teaching English at Banking University for about 8 years. And during most of the time I am at Banking University, I'm in charge of linguistic subjects such as phonetics and phonology, syntax and morphology, semantics, and some other related subjects to translation and interpretation. At my university, students are at my university, students somehow are less motivated and less independent than we expect them to be. Therefore, I am conducting this research in order to figure out what factors influence their motivation and autonomy in studying linguistic subjects. In my research paper, I will present 4 main points. The first one is about literature review. The second part, I will focus on the research question and the methodology. The results and findings of the research will come next. And then, last but not least, there are some pedagogical implications and limitations of my research. In the literature review, I will mention some significant roles of language and future corporate development when students studying linguistic subjects at university level. And then I will mention some opportunities and challenges in teaching linguistic subjects at Banking University. Now, the question is, why study English language as a major at university? Why not study the language at a foreign language center or else? The answer is, nowadays, the labor market is requiring a more fluent and skillful labor force who can master the language at the university level. It means that they need a more professional labor force in language and how to use the language in various situations rather than just knowing some skills or practical skills. Language learners, after they graduate from university, they can work in different fields. Therefore, more and more students enroll at Banking University with the major of English language. More specifically, they will study business English at Banking University so that they can work in different corporates and companies ranging from banking to finance sector. They can work as an English teacher or they can work as an interpreter or translator. Moreover, there are a large portion of our university graduates with English major work in the headhunting field, or they can be the master of ceremony somewhere else. So we can say that the increasing demand of English proficiency user makes our the foreign language department at university very, how can I say that? Very promising place for them to study. With linguistic majors, students can perform a variety of jobs in the future, ranging from the most common jobs to non-traditional jobs. For example, they can work as a translator, a linguistic professor, or foreign language teacher. So those are the traditional jobs, traditional career they can think of when they graduate from university. Or they can perform more specialized jobs like forensic linguist or lexicographer, or even they can become the computational linguist. With the increasingly developed labor market in terms of technology and other fields, Nowadays, language majors can work as a speech pathologist, librarian, or even the editor in some magazine or newspaper. They can be the copywriter somewhere. They can be the author of a very best-selling books, or they can be the reporter. So they can do a lot of things with their English majors. Moreover, when studying at university level, student needs to be very highly motivated and autonomous so that they can work independently, even with themselves, by themselves, or in a large groups. Studying at university requires them a lot as an mature student, and we need to pay more attention to their motivation and autonomy when acquiring English major subjects, such as right, the linguistic subjects or career-related subjects in taught in English. Now let's have a look at linguistics. Linguistics is the science of language, and these subjects provides us with knowledge about language and even children's language acquisition process. It means that when studying linguistics, we can have a deep insight in how we adapt the language, how we process the language, and how we develop our brand processing in terms of language. We can have a profound understanding of the structure of languages in general and one specific language. For example, when we study English language at university, we can have a broad view of languages all around the world in terms of phonetics and phonology, even morphology and syntax. And then we pay more attention, closer look at English subjects because it's our major. And then we make a comparison between languages so that we can figure out the similarities and differences between languages in order to produce a perfect message in in languages. And moreover, we can have a profound insight into language differences and socio-linguistic elements in daily interactions. If we go out of a university and enter into the job market, there are more chances of us, of our students to get in touch, in or they have the interactions with different people from different countries and different cultures. Therefore, the knowledge of language itself cannot be enough for a successful interaction in their workplace. They need something more than the language itself, more than just practical skills like speaking, listening, reading, or writing. They need to have the proper social linguistics knowledge. And that those are the reasons why linguist subjects are the must in every English major programs in every university around the world. And banking university is not an exception. Talking about linguistics, linguistics is a very broad term in which we have different branches like phonetics and phonology. These two branches focus on the sounds of words and the sounds of the language and sounds of languages. With morphology, students are provided the knowledge about the structure of the words, how the words are formed, and how we can create new words from what we have already known. With syntax, students have a knowledge of the structure of sentences, how they can put different words into a logic and grammatically correct sentence. And they can analyze and they can figure out the deeper structure of any new or long or complicated sentences. There come the semantics aspects. With semantics and pragmatics as well, students will have a look at the meaning of the sentence they are using every day and the meaning of the other speakers in a daily interaction. So the difference between semantics and pragmatics is that pragmatic is more about the practical use of the language. And all of these branches of linguistics altogether contribute to the learner's understanding and application of language in real situations. Talking about linguistics at Banking University in Ho Chi Minh City, these are the compulsory subjects in the English linguistics programs at university around the world. So as I mentioned before, Banking University is not an exception. We require students to master, or even they have to study and pass the exam in linguistic subjects in order to graduate from university. And linguistic subjects at Banking University consist of all components subjects in linguistics at the introductory level. We teach students phonetics and phonology, morphologies and syntax, semantics, discourse analysis, and contrastive analysis. All of the subjects last in about 30 or 40 periods per subject. And students studies these things should be at the second year, third year, or even the fourth year students to provide them with the basic foundation for their future job. So that is about the linguistic subjects at school and at university, and in to be more specific at our university, Banking University. Here comes some view about motivation and autonomy of the learners in relation to their academic achievements. Talking about motivations, motivation as defined in Cambridge Dictionary is an enthusiasm for doing something. However, with Pinterest admissions in 2014, learners' motivation is defined as the desire or disposition to engage and persist in the task. Therefore, motivation learners is an important condition for learning and other activities, and it is an influential factor in learners' determination and effort in anything related to their learning process. And learner motivation can be observed by looking at how the learners actually involve in an activity in a class. Now, what if the student lack motivation in their learning? They will have no impetus or inspiration to learn new things, and therefore they're not engaged in any learning activities. They will come to the class as an ignorant person, paying no attention to what is going on around them. They do not feel that they need to have a proper preparation for the lesson before the class, and they do not want to take part in any class activities or do not want to do any class like exercises related to the subject. Or after the class, they will throw away their notebook and classroom and just cram into dosing one night before the exams. So we can predict their achievements, right? Now, talking about learners' autonomy, this is the term originate from Greek language. And for the first definition, that is the ability to take care of one's own learning. You have to be autonomous, you have to be independent in order to to gain the autonomy. So, what is an autonomous learner? Autonomous learners is the one who can set their own learning agenda and is responsible for planning, monitoring, and evaluating their learning activities and overall learning process. This is a quite old definition of autonomous learners, but it is still true today. So, with learner autonomies, we have three corresponding pedagogical principles by Little. Okay? First, we talk about learners' involvement, and then we talk about their appropriate target language use, and there's some principle about the learner's reflection of what they have learned after the class. So, what are the educational benefits of learners' autonomy? Learner autonomy enables students or enable them to be independent and active in their learning process. Moreover, when being an independent and autonomous learner, students develop a positive attitude. Therefore, they have a capacity for reflection and a readiness to be proactive in self-management and interaction with others during their learning process. These things can help them to gain more positive and higher achievements in their learning. So let's talk a little bit about learners' academic performance and achievements. It is or they are influenced by the learner's motivation and autonomy in language acquisition process. And we can easily notice the learner's academic performance and achievement by looking at them in the class. They have less focus in the class activities. They have lower scores in progress tests and final exams, and they are less autonomous in class participation and task involvement. And they'll spend less time on self-studying and self-research on the subjects. Just because they lack motivation and lack autonomy in their language, in their learning process. So what they want to do is to get away as far as possible from what they have to do in the class and after the class. So here comes the research questions. There are two research questions in my study. The first one is, to what extent are English major students at Banking University of Ho Chi Minh City motivated and autonomous in their learning? And what factors influence their motivation and autonomy in studying linguistic subjects? In order to answer these two research questions, I have to conduct a study within my faculties, that is the Faculty of Foreign Language, and to be like to more like to talk a little bit about our university. So our university specializes in banking and finance and other economic fields. Therefore, some some people feel it's very strange to have a foreign languages, a faculty of foreign languages in our department. They have never thought about having such a faculty specialized in foreign languages in a banking university. So they just think that we teach students about practical skills so that students can do their jobs in a bank or in a financial institutions. However, we aim at providing students with language knowledge and train them or teach them how to apply it in their future jobs and contexts. At Banking University, at first, people think that linguistic subject is not the main focus because we train them to work in business context. So they need more about business English rather than linguistic subjects. So students entering Faculty of Foreign Languages in Banking University would English subjects adds tied up the minor thing. It's not the main focus. And we have really different coastline and outcomes in comparison with others university focusing on languages like or language teaching like University of Pedagogy or University of Humanity and Science and Social Science. So with linguistic subjects at Ranking University, we teach students the subjects of introduction to linguistics to provide them a broad overview of linguistics in general. But unfortunately, up to now, this subject is taught in Vietnamese. Therefore, there's a kind of gap between what they learn in Vietnamese and what they have to learn in English in the future, in later years. After studying Introduction to Linguistics, students will move on to phonetics and phonology when they come to year two of their study at Banking University. And after that, they will move on to morphology and syntax and semantics, discourse analysis, and contrastive analysis. So what are the differences between our linguistic subjects and the things out there? English major students at our university will need to study these subjects when they move on to the second or the third year, or even some students study these subjects at their final years. Even though linguistic subjects are compulsory, but students first approach these things with a sense of fear and unwillingness. Because, as I mentioned before, students entering banking universities with the hope that they spend almost 4 years at university to improve and to polish their practical skills like listening, speaking, writing, and reading. And they didn't have a proper like direction or information about English major at university. So when they move, when they step into linguistic subject, firstly about introduction to linguistic thoughts in Vietnamese, they were kind of like entering the frozen land because they hardly understand anything about linguistics and linguistic subjects, especially with those very strange terms in linguistics. Therefore, in order to conduct a study, I need to cover 3 methods. I use 3 methods. The first one is I observe my students in 3 months in the classes of morphology and syntax and semantics in 3 months, and then I will ask them to complete a surveys with about 100 students participate in the surveys. And these students are from 3 different linguistics classes, studying morphology, syntax, and semantics. And then I have a face-to-face conversation with 20 more students with different learning motivation and autonomy, and then therefore they have different academic performance. With the class observations, the class observation shows that about 90% of the students frequently attend the class, but only half of the students are actively joining class activity and willing to volunteer to do any task that I ask them to do. Talking about learner autonomy, through my observation, I can see that only about 50% of students prepare the lesson before class and make further research after school. Half of the students do that, but half of these students can actually understand what they are doing and what they are searching for without difficulty. Talking about the survey in my research paper was designed in order to figure out whether the learner motivation have either the trait or a, a state orientation. And to figure out their task motivation involves both situation specific motives and general motives. It means the things they do, are they actually involved because they are motivated by the task or they have the general motivation by themselves. And the questionnaires used in the survey consists of 3 sections. It's quite a long questionnaire, and students need to cover them all under the supervision of the teachers. Section A targeted on the learner's trait motivation for learning in general. And then in section B, we try to figure out the learner's situation-specific motivational disposition for learning English as a major. In section C, we aim at examining and investigate learners' attitude toward their English language teacher, i.e. me, and the English linguistic courses. And moreover, we want to know how they feel or how they think about their peer English major learners in their classes. And we want to see how they view themselves as an English major learner studying linguistic subjects. For the surveys, the answer shows that in section A, about 60% of the students were demotivated in the subjects. They explain for their demotivation is that they didn't have enough information on how to integrate knowledge gained in their practical learning in future application. Even though they are like the teachers, even though the teachers have informed them before, have taught to them before about how these subject, the linguistic subject, can be applied in their future job. But not all of the students fully understand about these applications. So about 60% of the students take part in my study feel demotivated, and they do not feel like studying the subjects. And more alarmingly, about 30% feel that they cannot connect themselves, they cannot link the knowledge they have learned before with things they are learning during the courses. Therefore, they decided to disconnect themselves from the course. They refuse to take part in any class activity, and sometimes they refuse to go to the class. And only about 10% feel motivated and interested in the course. They actually involve in the class activities, and they really love going to the class to learn new things and to figure out how the words are formed and how the sentences are structured, etc. For section B, we figure out that the majority of students understand the necessity of being autonomous in their learning, but only 25% of them try to make themselves as an independent and proactive learners. The rest of the students either acknowledge the importance of independence learning, but refuse to turn themselves to be a useful language learners. And that's a part of the majority of students who just want to study anything that can easily absorb and understood rather than very complicated things like linguistics. For section C, we have the questions to ask about the students' attitudes toward their language learner. So 90% of them agrees that the teachers that were very like devoted and tried her best to deliver the knowledge and the message to the student. And 90% of them appreciate the teacher's expertise in the language. With the point of the attitude towards the English linguistics course, 80% fail to link the course content with their career prospects. And about their classmates, 70% fear of being different from their classmates, and others do not willingly volunteer in class activities. Students at Banking University, especially students at foreign languages at Banking University, they're not very active students. They are rather passive in their learning, and they need really greater encouragement and motivation from the teachers and from their classmates. But on the other hand, a lot of students refuse to enter the class activities, and they need to be forced rather than volunteer. And about the attitudes toward students and the linguistic learners, 90% of them find the course very challenging and complicated. And these things encourage them not to take part in the class activities. When talking to students face to face, I asked 20 students, 10 male and 10 females, some questions about their autonomy in learning in general and linguistic subject in specific. The results show that females are more independent learners than males, as they are traditionally more hardworking and they try their best to gain more knowledge in order to have a better job in the future. And females are more prepared, with the result that eight female students in comparison with 3 male students prepare the lessons before the class, actively involved in class activities, and then after the class they review the lesson, get more information on the internet and other resources. So what do we have? Students score less than what they have done in language use courses like listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And the application of knowledge in their future career seems to be less transparent. Students still do not know how to apply what they learned so far in their future job. So about our studies, that we have several inevitable limitation, as this study was conducted with only about 100 students participate in the survey, and 20 of them and 20 more students take part in the face-to-face interview or conversation so that the researcher can learn more about their autonomy and motivation in learning. The study lasted for about 3 months, and with 2 linguistic subjects, morphology and syntax, and semantics. At Banking University, morphology and syntax are taught in under one course name, within about 30, 30 periods. So the time limits, the time frame of the class restrain the learners and the teacher's effort to deeply discover the beauty of the language. And from these limitations, the learners feel that linguistic subjects are extremely complicated and they cannot learn new things or interesting things about these subjects. On the other hand, the teacher needs to balance between the course length and the course overloaded knowledge. That there was too much information, too much knowledge, too much about the beauty of the subjects. They need to deliver to the student. But the term is at about 30 periods, and one period lasts for about 45 minutes. So the the challenge of balancing the language knowledge, the linguistic knowledge, and the linguistic content, and the time frame is really high. So, what do we need? What do we want to say? What do we want to imply after the research? Lower academic performance result from student less autonomy and less motivation in their learning. So how can we as teachers can improve their academic performance? I suggest that the teachers need to change their teaching method a little bit. They can make a move from the traditional lecturing to a flipped and more student-centered lessons. Traditional lectures occurs in the process that the teacher presents the knowledge, the student practice the knowledge, and stop there. After student go home, they can apply the knowledge they have learned in their practical situation. But student at Banking University, they have to balance between their study life, student life, and private life in terms of doing part-time jobs and learning some other skills. So they spend less time than expected and required for linguistic subjects. And I suggest the teacher try to adopt the cooperative learning strategies in which students study in groups to complete the tasks, to do everything they have to do in the class and after the class. Teamwork can help students a lot in their learning, and they can learn a lot from each other. Last but not least, the teacher should relate the lessons with on-the-job activities. For example, when teaching morphology, the teachers should relate the students with how they can analyze the words in terms of morphemes and figure out the meaning of each morpheme in a new context by picking a very novel word from a financial magazine, and then let the student analyze the word and try to figure out the meaning of the word, the new word, and then transfer those meaning into a financial document or article. By doing this, the students feel that they can use the knowledge in their real life, and those can those things can actually motivate their learning. When teaching syntax, the teacher can pick out some very complicated sentences from Financial Times magazine, for example, and they will help the student to chop the sentence into pieces and figure out the connection and the relation between these pieces. And from that point, can help the student to deeply and accurately understand the sentence meaning and how they can use the sentence in that Financial Times magazine in order to produce a more perfect translations. That is about the teachers. And what about the students? Student needs, firstly, remove the existing prejudice toward linguistic courses and their application in their real life. If they still think that linguistics are complicated subjects and they has no use in the future, how can they study those things? And then students need to be very proactive and autonomous in their learning. Last but not least, ask questions whenever they have problems with their learning and with their subjects. Asking can give students a time to challenge themselves and a time to consolidate what they have understood about the language. So, based on our limitation and implication, we have some recommendations for the study. If we have more time and more chances, we can conduct the studies in larger contexts with more participants and more linguistic subjects and more lecturers involved so that the result can be more reliable and can be more applicable. That is the end of my presentation today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me in my email address here. And this is my cell phone.